Ashley, are we all set? Can we, I've got my microphone on now. O ina iwi huri nei, nau mai haere mai, kai tēnei hui, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure and a real privilege to be here in the mighty Horowhenua. Thank you very much for the invitation, Mayor Bernie, and also Sam, Councillor Jennings, for your hospitality, your manaaki to have our committee here meeting here for the first time for this committee, but we know that we're going to have a regular schedule and we'll be coming back to the Horowhenua. Welcome to any members of the public who might be joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. There will be an opportunity for you to be able to make comment or ask questions as we go through, and we're in the hands of the wonderful Ashley Huria here in Horowhenua, and she'll keep me in line as to whether there are any comments that I've missed. And so we do appreciate your being here, members of the public. This session is being recorded and it's being live streamed, and it's on the Council's YouTube channel. So if you are listening to this in real time, that's great. And if you're listening to the recording of this, then I hope you're having a good day. We're going to be led through now. Ashley, would you be so kind as to lead us through the health and safety announcement? Thank you. We meet at the bottle store next door. Okay. Thank you very much, Ashley. I appreciate that probably wasn't recorded and might not have come through the microphones, but if you are listening, it is nice to know that the pickup zone, the area that we collect if there is an emergency is outside the bottle store next door. I'm not sure if I've ever heard a health and safety announcement where people might be in slight anticipation and hope of an emergency and evacuation before, but thank you very much, Ashley. We do appreciate it. Hayden, I wonder whether you might be do us the honour of leading us in a karakia to start today's proceedings. Would that be okay, Hayden?
Yep, certainly. Tēnā tātou, mihi nui ki a tātou ku whai wā kia piri ki runga I tēnei kaupapa o tō tātou wai. Ka tika ka mihi atu ki a koe tai, te kuroho ki o, no roto mai poko ku tai mai, hei taringa ariare ka rongo nei I a tātou, e kōrero nei, kia tautoko I tērā marama kei te eke mai, mihi nui ki a koe, o tino tātou katoa. Ka marama tākiri ko te atakorihi ko te manu, he manu korori, he manu korora, kōrero tia mai no tō wakarere nau mai e te ata haerera e te pōkorangi nui e tui honei, ko papatuana koe tā katoa ke whiti whano hara mai te toki haumia hui e tae ki e. Tēnā tātou.
Thank you, Hayden. Really appreciate that. Welcome to everybody who could make it here into the Horowhenua and who's in this room. We've got joining us online Danielle Harris from Ngā Tapuai Hau, Hayden, who we just heard from Turo from Ngā Tapuai Hau, and also Mayor Grant Smith. We also have Diana, who's Danielle's alternate, who will be attending the meeting in Diana's stead next meeting and is here to observe. So welcome, Diana. It is great that you could make the time available to be a part of our meeting today. I've got a screen right in front of me, and if you could either put your hand up electronically or you can wave your hand if you need something, want to say something if you're online, and I'm sure that I will catch it. Otherwise, the technology that is in front of us, I think, is slightly different from Palmerston North. It might be that I don't need to patch you in, but actually you just push the button with the icon of the voice of the face speaking, and then it will come live, and I presume it will come up on my screen, so I know who wants to speak, and we will make it work. So apologies if I miss you, and you can put your hand up. Voting is also for anything that we have to pass in a motion is by a raising of hands, which makes things a little easier. And thank you very much for those of you officials and chief executives who can join us, who are sitting in the room as well. We have. Do we have any apologies? Have you heard from Marge as to whether she's an apology? Look, at the end of the meeting, if we need to retrospectively enter an apology for her absence, then we will do so. She is based out in Taihape, so she's got quite a journey to get here. We'll see and hope that she might be able to join us by the end of the meeting. Item 3, we actually have a notice of an additional item, ladies and gentlemen, and that is the paper that is head of the Joint Shareholders Committee, Central Districts Water, late item, and it revolves around, where's the name of it? It is an update. The title is the transition update from the chief executives. That is going to be presented to us, if we agree, by the Executive Director, Chris Dyberg. According to the local government legislation, if there is any documentation for this committee to consider that has been submitted within the time and not in a sufficiently timely manner to meet the provisions of the notice of the papers to be considered, then it is incumbent upon this committee to approve the tabling of that paper and for our discussion. I need to say the reasons for the lateness, and the reason for the lateness is it's just a simple matter that the timing didn't align with the legal notice that needs to be given of the papers to be considered for this meeting. The reasons for the urgency and why it couldn't then be discussed at the next meeting is that significant, as we know, we're living in a fast-paced world, and the update on the transition is appropriate to be given today. It was believed because by the time we meet again, things would have substantially have moved on. So the reason for the lateness is the timing, and the reason for the urgency is that it's important that we be updated as to the progress from the chief executives as to the transition. I will propose a motion that we accept this additional item of the transition update from the chief executives. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mayor Watson, Andy Watson. Discussion. Do I have any discussion on the proposal to accept that for our agenda today? A show of hands, and perhaps even online, a show of hands as to acceptance of that. Unanimous, passed. Thank you, committee. I do appreciate it, colleagues. Declarations of interest, you know that I hope those have been completed and forwarded to Hannah and the team. And if you haven't done that, or if there's been any change, or if there's anything specific to this meeting in particular, that we make sure that we file those declarations of interest. Public comment I've covered. Welcome to any public members of the public who might be listening in online, and we hope that there is an opportunity or a facility for you to ask questions if you have any of the items to be considered. We've had confirmation. Okay, we've got a couple of things that are not on the agenda that probably, strictly speaking, should have been, but they will be. They will actually be rolled over into the agenda for the next meeting. I don't think that is fatal. Then we've got items 6, 7, and 8, plus the new item of the transition update, and 9, which is the meat of the meeting today. Without further ado, let's move to item 6, which is the draft statement of expectations. You can find that on page 5, colleagues, of your pack. It is accompanied by a memo from me, just outlining let's call it version 2 of the statement of expectation. For those of you who might be joining us from the public, the statement of expectation is incredibly important job, if not, at least in the initial stages, one of the most important tasks of this committee, of the Shareholders Committee, because the statement of expectation is where we actually articulate as clearly and as concisely as we possibly can the instructions that the shareholders, through this committee, have for the board in the running of the new Central Districts Water company. So this is a direct instruction of expectations, communication with the board that we are intending to have to them approved for their feedback by the 30th of June, and then hoping that they will get back to us by mid-July with any observations that they might have, and that it can be formally approved by us. But it is an important piece, and we've been doing quite a bit of work on that, including a workshop earlier this month, which I'm very grateful for how all of the parties have lent in. So version 2 is there. This is still a working draft, so this is not for approval today. My proposal is that it's not actually, we're not going to turn this into a workshop. Kia ora, Marge. Good to see you. No, it's all good. It's all good. You've got a very long trip to get here, and it's wonderful that you could make it. We've got a seat ready and waiting for you over here. Marge Heaney is representative of Ngā Tapawai Aho. Fantastic to see you. So we're not approving anything today. There'll be no vote on agreeing to that to this draft. We've got a series of specific workshops with all 4 of the partners represented in this shareholders committee coming up over the next fortnight. We will not be moving or proposing amendments today of that draft. I do want to highlight 3 points, I think 4, 5, and 6 on page 7 of your pack, ladies and gentlemen, under discussion. I just want to note those 3 points, and then I would like to go around, if I might put people on the spot, and ask either each of you or a representative of the 4 partners here today, what are your initial, I suppose, a pulse check. I'd like a pulse check here as to your feeling about where version 2 is at, and perhaps the 2 or 3 main points that you expect that your council in Ngā Tapawai Aho will be wanting to look at. I'd like that said in the open here for us to then be each of it, us to take that away for our respective meetings. I don't propose any discussion on those or any to and fro. So a bit of a pulse check in a moment. First, page 7, under discussion of my memo that accompanies the second version of the Statement of Expectation. Point 4 I've got there. I just wanted to note that Rangitikei District Council had referred to in part of its feedback to a role of the board and therefore the company in the education of the public. And that wasn't mirrored by any other submission. But it is something that, at least in passing, I know that I've had a number of conversations with people about an expectation for the company, that there will be an element of education in the context of bringing the public within the service area, which of course is the Palmerston North, Rangitikei and Horowhenua areas, the service area, as part of the imperative of this company to be transparent and to be open and to bring the communities, plural, with them. My question for your consideration, and not for discussion necessarily today, but what might be an expectation of education of the public. One council has brought that up. I think it's a really valid point, and would like to hear when we meet back again as to what you think, if that might validly be worded and put within the Statement of Expectation, and what that wording might look like. If I, from memory, when Rangitikei District Council had put it in their feedback, it was actually within the context of a broader point, and so it was, I won't quite say it was said in passing, but it was encased within a broader point that was looking at other things. I've pulled it out and I'm specifically putting on the table for us to expressly consider in your workshops. 2.5, it says, paragraph 5. A focus on keeping things local, work plans and staffing, for example, was emphasised by Palmerston North City Council in its feedback to me and by Rangitikei District Council, and it has been included under clause 9C. Sam, you're nodding your head. I don't anticipate that is going to be controversial. I anticipate that actually we probably all agree and approve that. I'm just raising it that it wasn't necessarily a universal part of the feedback, and wasn't there in the first edition, but I've included it on the back of those submissions from two councils. I think it raises some continuity. It improves continuity. I think it's a really good addition. But again, I just raise it for your notice. And finally, paragraph 6, Palmerston North City Council included reference to the expectation of the company at an appropriate time, but emphasising the importance of the company moving towards establishing its own credit rating. Establishing its own credit. Welcome to the Hot Whenua. It was an expressive car that had just gone past, let me put it that way. Palmerston North City Council had included the expectation of the company developing, working towards its own credit rating. Palmerston North was the only one who suggested it, but I know there's been wider conversations about that. Mayor Smith, you've got your hand up. You might like to make a comment about that. Over to you. You're still on mute, I can see that. There you go.
Thanks, Chair. Kia ora everyone, and sorry I can't be there. I'm just having a rare day off today, but I'm working mostly on Zoom. I've got a number of things, Chair, and I know my colleague, Councillor Zabellin, has as well, just from a Palmerston North perspective. I'm quite happy just to go through them as a list. I'm not sure how you want to do that.
Yeah, you probably jumped the gun a little bit there, but that's fine. I've gone through what I was going to say in terms of the memo, and now it might be good for us to go around and just get a pulse check, and what your initial observations as representatives, but also feedback if you've had a chance to speak to your colleagues, and it would be good to hear those. I'd like to keep it relatively brief, and on that basis, we can start with you, Mayor Smith.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks to everybody that's worked on this, especially you, to get us to this point. And look, our general comments, it looks good. The draft is good, but there's a number of things which we will ask politely that are included, and I think most of them will probably be relatively acceptable from our partners. Just on the question you asked around the credit rating, probably because we, as a larger council, base ourselves on credit ratings. We've been with Standard & Poor's for decades. We have a very strong credit rating as a council. We felt that in time that the water entity, the company, should have its own credit rating. It'll have a reasonable amount of assets, it'll have income, it'll be operating, and that may be something after a period of time once they're established. So that was just an answer to your first question.
Right.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, I just said thank you.
Yep. Okay, number of questions. So just in terms of I'll start from the start, and I know my colleague will have some other points as well. So the period of operation and review, although we view SOEs, and remember we've got a few CCOs, so we've done a bit of the stuff in the past, and when it is a bit of a start-up, a bit of an establishment, I think there does need to be a little bit more continued contact with the shareholders rather than seeing them out for 3 years and not coming back in. And so we believe that we should operate for a period of a year for the first couple of years, and then perhaps after the first 3 years, it then goes into its 3-year period, and then we let them. They'll be established. We know what's coming. They get on with their work. And I realise, so that's number 5. Number 6 there says, and it contradicts itself a little bit, that at any time the committee could propose some changes. The second comment there, I think, I'm not sure how that can be done or what triggers that if the delegation is to the committee. So that should sort itself out if there was an agreement to having that yearly SOE update at the start. I don't expect any answers to these, by the way. I'm just making comments.
That's great, and I won't be seeking answers. We'll get straight into a to and fro of a sort of a workshop, and I don't want to do that for today. I think these are really good to flag, and then they can be brought up. They can be brought up. They be kept in the representatives' minds when you have your own workshop. So continue, Grant. You're doing well.
Okay, so then moving through to, this is Palmerston North specifically, just where the word Palmerston North is, it should be Palmerston North City Council, and perhaps PNCC in brackets. They are different things, Palmerston North in the city to PNCC is the TA, and that's just one word stuff. I think where we have got Palmerston North there in number 23, we just put in PNCC. I don't know why. And look, we're not adverse to it, but why is the comment, if there's any departure from our future development strategy or stormwater strategy, that would be clearly signalled to the council. Now, if that is the case, okay, that's fine, but why is Palmerston North singled out and none of the other shareholders? So maybe
what paragraph are you looking at, sir?
So that's I'm on number 23.
Look, can I just say, actually use this as an opportunity? I have in the memo challenged you all as to why I've included the region and Tapawai specific comments here, but I'm not convinced that any of them add much, to be honest. And I would, if we do have them, I'd like them to have greater continuity. I've included them, but they were each quite different. In fact, now, Tapuaho didn't necessarily have one specifically. I just pulled a provision out of one of their submissions that felt that if we're all going to have a district-specific comment, then Tapuaho needed one as well. So I had to put something in there. But I suppose I've laid down the challenge in the memo saying, do we really need something specific? And is it genuinely not covered in the general comments? And that point right there, Mayor Smith, is that it's not specific to Palmerston North. So my answer to that is it ought not to be there. It can be covered in the general. So the broader issue is, do we need something specific about regions? And if so, let's see if we can get it to follow the similar form for each, so they're not just disparate, incompatible statements. Continue, Grant.
Just to respond to, so just in response, I think that we have quite a different view. We think does need to be some specific, because we all have quite major projects from Rangitikei, Horowhenua and Palmerston North, and obviously Tapawai have probably a more macro view over the whole rohi. But things like the nature calls, wastewater treatment plant absolutely needs to be in there, and I think we wouldn't get any agreement from our city if that wasn't mentioned in some way. And I think it's just keeping it brief. We don't want to go into chapter and verse. And if the Waters Board needs something, we've got absolutely truckloads of information to give them, and I know they'll have it in their water plan strategy and etc. But we do want to highlight it, and on number 24, we just need to say their nature calls, because that is the project name. Nature calls.
Oh, you're breaking up.
So we're pretty.
You're breaking up.
Sorry, we're pretty firm on that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, and that's
Can you
fine.
hear me now?
I just cut and pasted it out of your submission. You didn't say nature call, so it doesn't say it in there. But that's fine. We can sharpen the pencil, and if you come back with some more specific words, I'm very happy to include that in the draft. Very happy.
Put it all in writing, but I just wanted to signal it because this is a formal meeting. And also on relationship, and I'll speak a bit louder, on relationship expectations on 26, just need to understand what the description of regular what regular contact would be, where CDW is expected to obviously have regular contact. What does that mean? On number, and we'll put that in writing again, on number 27, we note that the half-yearly reporting is okay. We think that's good, and we understand there will always be a quarterly report which the board puts out. We just wonder how they could be circulated, because they'll exist. On moving over to number 28, which is around the establishment expectations, it's very definitive around the LGFA. Just wonder if the wording there, does that preclude any other opportunities? This is obviously around funding, and do we just ring fence ourselves to the LGFA, or is there other opportunities? That's just a question, really.
Yeah, good point.
Yep. Number public engagement, number 29. Couple of things there around are there examples of what the committee will what policies, what will those be? This would be good to understand what they are. And public engagement over major changes like water meters, I think that should be signalled somehow. How's that going to be handled? Does CDW just implement that without talking to anybody, or is there some sort of signal of it? And how public views are brought in. The big one probably for us is price harmonisation, and my colleague Councillor Zabellin might want to speak to this as well. But we feel the draft SOE has weakened considerably on the original. There was a section around timing of price harmonisation, which has been removed. And now there's no time frame, only a requirement to work on it. We just feel that's just a little bit open. We suggested additional wording that pricing should be well signalled in advance to our communities, with initial pricing aligned to the Shareholders Council's LTP assumptions. We've seen it go wrong, very wrong, in other setups, and we don't want to follow that path. And we sort of understood that was a general agreement around the table.
Well, that's not. It's actually not a general agreement. It's a specific agreement under the shareholders' agreement, which this needs to be. This doesn't stand on its own. It's read in light of transfers agreements and the shareholder agreements. But I take your point, and if you could come back with what I encourage with all the workshops is not merely to come back to the whole with questions, but suggest some formal words as well, because these are all good points. That would be really helpful. Really helpful.
Yep. Number 35, as I said, description of affordability. It's mentioned, but no context, and we'll suggest something a little bit more explicit around that.
Noting that the Water Services Delivery Plan has a section on what affordability means, and this company will be bound by that. I'm just loath to come up with another definition of affordability if this group has already approved one in another binding document. But we could make an express reference to it. But I hear you.
We'll mimic it, but at the moment it's not mimicked. It doesn't even reference it. So for somebody reading this as a standalone, and this is what they'll go to, they won't go to the 800-page water services strategy. They'll come to this 10-page SOE. So we just need to be clear on that, and that's how we've operated in the past. So look, I might just leave it at that, and I'm sure my colleague will fill any gaps that I've missed. Thank you.
I really appreciate that, Grant. They were really constructive and very helpful. I'm somewhat relieved that I think, like you said, that I don't think there's any sort of game changers or brick walls there. Those are things that are just the fine tuning. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I think probably to keep that momentum going, Katie, Councillor Isabella, would you be happy to speak now and to follow on? So we'll keep.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I just had I had 3 questions and then a couple of comments, but I might just start with a response to the conversation that you had about the local flavour statements and whether or not they should be in or out. And I just thought that to my mind, what that adds is some assurance for our communities, which is important in transition. So it's more of a comms thing than anything. So it might not operationally be very significant, or a lot might not hinge on it, but I think we have to front this to our communities and show that we've had some consideration and that it's not all being absorbed necessarily while we transition. So I think as we're walking our communities through this, I think for the price of a brief paragraph in the statement of expectations, I think that's not a big deal necessarily, because the average person on the street who's trying to understand this isn't really versed in the intricacies of all of these documents and how they relate to each other. So it seems to me no harm in putting a paragraph in, which just provides a little assurance, and it helps us when we go out to communicate it to our residents that yes, we've our area has been accounted for in this way, even if it's not if nothing's hinging on it operationally.
Can I say that that's great clarification? I certainly don't have any problem. I mean, I'm independent. I certainly don't have any problem with that. That's not what these paragraphs do at the moment.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure that our council will take those words and maybe tweak them a little to more reflect that kind of thing.
That's great. And perhaps as we're going around and getting a pulse check from everybody, you might just want to say what your comments about the regional, specific, local comments, because if that resonates what Katie has just said, then that would, I would suggest, lead us towards quite a different framing of those short paragraphs than what they are at the moment. Thank you.
I think that's something we can hash out. I had a couple of questions, which again we don't need to have answers for today, but I was curious, and one of them was about the principles, that there are some principles being worked into this new iteration, and it wasn't quite clear to me sort of what status or precedence those principles would have in relation to the rest of the document. So I don't have any problem with the principles themselves, but I wondered if their purpose could do with some clarification. And what precedents they might have within the rest of that document.
Would welcome some suggested wording on that.
Yeah, great, thank you. There was, in terms of the SOE period of operation and review, and that point that the SOE can be reviewed at any time by the committee, I wondered whether or not we'd consider whether there's a trigger or a threshold for doing so, or whether just anyone could put it on the table and that sets that process in motion. Just thought procedurally there might be some more we could wrap around that potentially, to give the board some assurance that there would be a process that would be followed, or signals that could come that the SOE might
again, some wording would be good in my anticipation of the emotion of this committee here, rather than just a whim of an individual. But some wording would be great.
Yeah, I'm trying to take the whim element, or at least contain that a little bit.
Absolutely.
And then there was I think paragraph 4 is a statement that was in the previous draft, but it's been elevated up to this beginning section, and it says the committee acknowledges that the achievement of all the expectations must be viewed against the context of the current operating environment, the condition of the assets now are being transferred, the operating budgets available, and the time required to establish new systems and capabilities. So I was questioning what's the point of that statement and why elevate it to the beginning of the document, because to me it kind of reads a little bit like a get out of jail free card or like a big old exemption. So that was just my initial response to that. But as to our comments, the one that concerned me the most, and I think would concern my colleagues, was the relationship expectations, and I feel like that has been weakened a bit. because what reads now is the board will maintain regular contact. Previously, the wording had been they're expected to develop strong and trusting partnership relationships with all three shareholding councils and the mana whenua in the service area. And I felt like that's maintaining regular contact is quite a big step down from that. And I'm not sure what would be the motivation for changing that framing. I think we would expect them to maintain strong, trusting partnerships with us, and that would be my preference rather than just regular contact.
No, I can't answer that, but all I can say it wasn't politically motivated. So there's no backstory here.
Yeah.
It's
I
and
understand.
nobody else wordsmithed this. Nobody. It was just me. So you can take it from me that there was no grand master plan there.
Yeah. Oh no, I would not.
It might have been that I just picked that out from a wording from a submission, but there would. I hear you on that, and I quite like that strong and trusting relationships. And if people feel that that's what they want to go back to, absolutely no problem. And if you can give us some guidance of the wording of that, would be great. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that would give us some comfort because we're at the beginning of this relationship, and we may get to a stage further down the track where regular contact is all that's required. But at this stage, I think we'd want to at least signal that we'd want our relationship to be really strong.
Yes. And
the other bit that jumped out at me was the customer charter section, which I think in the previous iteration was quite. Well, it was quite directive, but I liked that level of directive in that particular context because it showed that they would communicate their approach to setting charges, how they would engage with the public, and how they would consider public views. And that's sort of been a bit more generalised into some open language. And I'm not objecting to that language, but I felt that it was stronger before. And that was something that we talked about in the workshop, that we're keen for our communities to be well communicated with, and that's something that we have a lot of experience in. So I preferred the previous version where it said these are the things the customer charter will say or will address. And then just to Rangitike's point about the public education element, the previous draft also said that the charter should be both published and promoted. And that hasn't carried through on this, but I felt that had a public education element to it if it was setting out those things. This is how we'll take your feedback into account. This is how we'll engage with you. This is how we'll set prices. And if it's published and promoted, I think that at least goes some way to addressing that. So I think we have generalised that, but I think we liked it a bit when it was a bit tighter in terms of the public-facing element.
So more... what I take from that for the others as well is you would prefer it to be more directive, because it was highly directive as to exactly what that charter would contain.
Yeah, it had to include, whereas now it sort of talks about they'll set out their commitment to operate openly in the interests and the well-being of water. And I just think as a customer charter, who's someone who's picking that up, if I was reading that, I'd want to know more about how can I engage with you. What's your approach to setting your prices? What's your approach to environmental stewardship? That sort of thing. Clearer, because it's for a customer. That's something that I think...
Although that starts with an assumption that the board won't do that within their customer. What we spoke about in that last workshop was our appetite between directive and strategic, and empowering them to put quality documents of which has got to come back for our feedback. Versus actually line and verse of telling them exactly how in minutiae detail, which is sort of what it was. But I hear that, and if that's what everybody would like, and it would be good to get feedback on that as to whether the level of abstraction is now too generalised with the customer charter, and whether you'd like something more specific. And if so, you've got the version 1 as the default for that. Because if you came back and said we'd like something more specific, I would suggest we just pick that up and put it back in again. So that's the option before you. Great, thank you.
Thank you. I just had one other, I think, because the Mayor Smith covered the other points, especially around price harmonisation, but it was just on that touch of affordability and the definitions of affordability. So I take your point that is well defined elsewhere, but I think this could be one of those points where it's signposted, which is what Councillor Jennings was saying. If we can clearly signpost to where those things are defined, that could just provide some context about what affordability means. It means this as defined in the water services strategy. I think that was pretty much, those are the things that I think will come up when we talk about it amongst our council and our workshop. So I wanted to put
You're
those
certainly
on
not limited to those either. This is just a pulse check.
Yeah.
Edie, how about we come to Rangitikei?
Yes, but before we come to Rangitikei, I just wondered, Palmerston North have made some very good points, and they'll be common, but effectively we're going to be going through 9 people through the document multiple times. And I wondered if we could have just delivered section by section, because I think all of us are on a similar page here. I don't see any great difference in terms of how it's laid out, but I just wondered if...
What I suggest is we don't go through section, otherwise we're going to turn into a workshop. What I'd suggest is that you've heard quite a complete and some really good suggestions from Palmerston North. If you've got anything over and above that you think is going to be highlighted in your meetings, that I encourage you to be able to say those. If you don't, then you can just say, look, I think we're on the same page and many of those points are we will have in common.
Okay, so in general terms, first of all, thank you to the Chair and thank you to also the Chief Executive Staff that have put a huge amount of effort into this. I think the general framework and format is great. I've supplied a critique earlier where some of that has been incorporated into it, as have others. But if I'm going back through the document, in terms of the theme of just looking back at my notes, for instance, if you go to clause 19, I wonder where that's under regional benefits, local flavour, recognising that previous timeframes and sequencing of influenced by council funding and balance sheet constraints, that applies to all of us. Again, if I look at the following page, and under Rangitikei District Council, any departure from such plans clearly need to be signified from council. That again applies to all of us. So there are some, and again in 23, departure from plans should be clearly signalled. Palmerston North, absolutely agree, but again it applies to all of us. I do agree with the need for some recognition to distinct things, such as for us, the contractual around rural water schemes, etc. And Palmerston North have made a provision in terms of their requirements. I agree in terms of establishment expectations that there could be other funders. I just wondered whether under affordability, equity and value for money, is complying with the law, that we cannot as an entity cut off water, and I wondered whether there should have been, and I may have missed it within the document, that there should be a general statement that the entity needs to comply with the law. Various laws, statutes or something as a catch-all. But otherwise than that, I thought we're on the right track.
Great, thanks, Mayor.
We're keeping those general principles. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Dave, can we come to you?
Thank you, Chair. Largely pretty happy with the content of the document. I think the formats is good. I think it covers largely the expectations of the statement of expectation, if that's a way to say it. I'm also pretty happy that clearly the operational review period is signalled early in the document, because I think that's pretty critical, whether that's 3 yearly or biannually or yearly, as indicated by Mayor Smith in the early setup. I'm pretty relaxed about how that is. 2 points. Item 9 and then referencing to 35, there's a couple of strong comments there about ensure affordability to community and shareholders, and then going through to 35, delivery of value for money, whilst mainly, I'd like to see something, and whether it's in here or not, but there needs to be a direction that is demonstrable to the shareholder committee, whether or not it's in a yearly financial report or 6-monthly financial report. I'd like to see that can be measured and shown some sort of credibility, as it does form a strong comment and theme throughout the document. We need to be able to see it measured back to us. So that would be my only 2 comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah. Yeah, we might be able to tighten that up under the reporting. Yeah, point well made. Yeah, again, it's about statements that aren't to appear to be at the whim or as best we can, that it's got some traceability to it. Thank you. Danielle, I see you've got your hand up. Perhaps we can come to Ngā Tapu Waiahau.
Thank you. Kia ora. I just want to acknowledge all the work that's actually gone into the second draft. I think we're very fortunate to have you as our chair providing your legal expertise, because it is no mean feat to bring 4 sometimes divergent groups of opinions together. I think overall, on behalf of Ngā Tapu Wai, we're feeling comfortable with it. It is clearly tried to be inclusive of everybody, and I just want to acknowledge that. Just a couple of points that I'm going to raise. I'm not going to go into the specifics of particular clauses because, as you say, we've got the workshop and ours is on the 2nd of June to do that. In terms of the local flavour, yes, we definitely support that as members of Ngā Tapu Wai. Each of our rohe are quite unique and quite distinct, and because we're in Taitoko today, a prime example of that is Lake Horowhenua for the iwi down there, which I noticed has been mentioned. So we're very supportive of that. We agree with many of the comments that have been raised by Palmerston North City Council around strengthening some of the language in terms of the partnership, and also probably having an annual SOE for the next few years as we embed the relationships between councils, iwi and CDW. I guess in terms of some of the things that we're going to raise in the workshop with the committee on the 2nd of June is probably around headings such as partnership and integration across the life cycle. And I think it's just really clarifying and enhancing some of the language, because sometimes we're kind of talked about stakeholder style language as opposed to partnerships. It's just making sure there's that early engagement before actually the decisions are being formed. So it's that not consultation after the fact. We probably are going to talk a little bit about wanting some stronger te tiriti wording around the settlement commitment, some of the legacy matters, and around the position of unsettled iwi and hapu. And also just about strengthening the involvement across the full life cycle of projects around that planning, design, consenting, delivery, monitoring, review, and public engagement. Then I guess in the reporting space, we noticed the enhancement, but we're probably looking for a bit stronger wording around reporting back to us as iwi and hapu. And then I guess around some of the environmental matters around more measurable kind of environmental outcomes, how we're going to seek cumulative effects to be addressed. We're not actually mentioned in emergency management. So, for example, our facility here in Maxwell's Line is actually a civil defence facility for our city in the times of emergencies. iwi sit in the sedum space, so whenever any natural disasters are happening, our councils contact us immediately, so we kind of need to be mentioned there. So those are probably the main ones, and just I guess that future growth planning around protecting our relationships in terms of our relationships with the land and the waterways and our various past sites, well, sites of significance, I should say. And then just around some of the performance framework reflecting some of our iwi outcomes. And of course, these are just general statements that will obviously be operationalised as CD Water stands up. But overall, yes, we think it's we're getting there, and we really genuinely acknowledge the inclusive nature of us all doing this together.
Thanks, Danielle. Can I just clarify a statement I said to Katie when I said that I'd penned it? I didn't say that to try and, I don't want anybody to get the impression that I'm trying to claim credit for this. This has been a collective work. I've curated what has been fantastic feedback from all of the partners, and great input from the chief executives. Have really benefited hugely from their guidance and wisdom and advice. And all I've really done is try to curate your actions, and so we've all played a very, very strong part in that. I didn't want to give the impression. I suppose what I was answering was that if there might have been any suggestion, not from you, Katie, but if there was any thought that there was any sort of backstory or agenda behind what was in here, and I wanted to assure the committee that there isn't, but not sound as it did come out that this is my document and I've claimed all the credit for it or otherwise. But thank you, Danielle. I appreciate that. Hayden, is there anything that you want to add to Danielle's comments?
No, we'll agree that Danielle is our mangai for this particular korero, and we fully support her korero, her position.
Thanks, Hayden. That's for you too much? Great. Well, yeah, thank you. Really, really appreciate that. Danielle, your hand's still up. Is that you want to comment further, or is that? Oh, no. Great. Hora whenua. Mayor Bernie.
Thanks, Chair Chris. Look, there's nothing that we've heard that sparks allergic reactions to us. We're more than comfortable in the spirit of partnership to go along with what has been suggested. Ultimately, this is a document that our councils in our community need to have some confidence that we are playing our governance role properly. So there's plenty in that document that does that, and we are pretty comfortable with how it's framed and stuff. I think, to be honest, there probably needs to be further refinement. There's a little bit of duplication in some parts of it that we could easily get down and make a bit clearer and not repetitive. In terms of the statements from individual councils, we were actually comfortable either way, to be honest, but happy that the others have suggested they remain, but agree that with Councillor Sabellin that this is part of a transition establishment document, so in time they probably could easily be removed when the document gets reviewed. And the fact that it does talk about in there that there needs to be from 1 July 2027 is an obvious date that where the water strategy document's going to be needed and things like that, where the price harmonisation and things like that would be needed to be more clearly defined in what it is. For me, the only other issue I probably would like to see a little bit more work done is the relationship expectations, and especially around the report, the 6-monthly report being a bit more forward-looking than being a reporting document of what has happened. It would be good to have a little bit more understanding of what is in front of the board and the organisation during that time, because 6 months is quite a long time.
Other than that, very comfortable. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Sam?
For the first time in history, I don't have much to say.
Great. Anybody else?
But just to reiterate that what Mayor Bernie said, that we've been discussing this and nodding and giving thumbs up, that what we've heard today we're really on board with, all of the feedback, no allergic reactions, and indeed I think we'd probably benefit if we could from having those specific things where people have nodded and thumbs up and no disagreement actually reflected in the draft before we do our workshops, because I think the more we can get narrow the sort of the issues that are live, the better. And so, yeah, we would advocate for that if that's possible. If we made a motion today that says we'll adopt it subject to those, in principle, subject to those changes for the workshops or something to that effect, I think that having that updated draft would be useful. The only very small point I was going to make was on the relation to the review period, and I've just lost the paragraph.
5, 6.
5, 6. Was that
4, 5?
I do recall seeing early on some advice from one of the lawyers around the duration of the SOE. So we has the statutory requirement is the 10-year life cycle, but actually I think what we're saying in this document is even though it has to legally have a 10-year life cycle, we're talking about a 3-year focus, but a 12-month review sort of point for at least for the first 3 years. So I think there's a common understanding and expectation that before go live date on 1 July that there would be a light touch, potentially kind of just check in, make sure that everything's still fit for purpose, and that there would be quite frequent sort of check-ins with this SOE for the first 3 years. But then that substantive review would be at that kind of 3-year mark. And I think that's what I've heard, but if I've got that wrong, keen to hear other views.
Thanks, Sam.
I will shut up.
Thanks, Sam. Look, I think what Mayor Smith, and thanks to you, Grant, for you went first. You took the bull by the horns and you had a number of specific points, but it sounds like they've really resonated. And I think what, and I know you've got your hand up, we'll come to you in a moment, but what I heard was that there's actually a greater appetite for it to just being a one, rather than the review after 1 year, just being 1 year. What I can, if that were to be, and so on that basis, perhaps going back to your discussions, that you might contemplate specifically whether it's a 1 year or the next step down would be a must have a review at a year. I can tell you, to give you some comfort, that in my discussions with the lawyers and also my informal sort of get together with the chair of the board, that they would both be very comfortable if it was only for a year. So I couldn't imagine that would throw any problem. Everybody, I think, everybody understands that this is getting up to speed with a complex relationship, and there would be some sympathy if it was just a year. Because I think we would all recognise that it wouldn't be that this would just get thrown out after a year, but there could be some adding, some taking away, some tweaks, some refinement. And so I know that from the discussions I've had, my pulse doesn't race when I hear that it might only be for a year. So on that point, I've just got a couple other points that you've made, but I know, Grant, you've got your hand up, and then Andy. Grant?
Thanks, Chair. Look, just a comment, really, just after hearing others. And you did ask for some sort of commentary there about whether we're being more generalistic or more specific. And I think as we start this entity, and as I said, we've done a few of these, and we have been quite general with some of them, and it'd be fair to say that sometimes hasn't worked out that well, and we've had to get a little bit more specific. I'd prefer to do it the opposite way around, where there is a little bit more being more specific on some things, but then we loosen over time after they're established. And I say that because at the end of the day, it's for the consumer and our wider communities, and really our expectations of the company or the entity, and we have to play our role as governors. We just can't say, here's a one-pager, away you go. We hope the chair and the CE and they all come back to us. But we do need to have some balance too. So without hamstringing the organisation, the company, we just have to be pretty clear about what our communities, and I say communities, expectations are, and within time, loosening up. So as I said, we're pretty firm on a few things, but I think they can be loosened up as the company starts establishing itself. There's an acceptance that people are going to get a rates bill, and their water rates are out of the council, the TA's bill, but they'll get another bill from the water entity. That'll need to bed in for a little while, so I think we do need to be quite specific on a few things and who's doing what, and even for our organisations, our staff, even as partners, that'll take a little bit of time to bed in. So I'm more of the view that we've just got to be a little bit more specific, not too much, only on some things, and then we loosen over time. So that's just my general comment, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
That's really helpful, Grant. Andy?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just picking up on Mayor Bernie's comment around the reporting and wanting not just to look at what has happened, but to look forward. I think that is critically important. As councils, we run long-term plans. We run 30-year infrastructural planning and a 10-year long-term plans. And giving the communities a view as to future direction is really, really important. So absolutely agree with Bernie. Point well put.
I think that resonated around the room. That's a really good point. Team, I've got sort of broad categories around customer, about some refinement about customer, and perhaps being a bit more directive with that, with an eye to the first edition, for the first version. The relationship components, there's a few components in with that we've all spoken to that need some refinement. The affordability component probably needs a little bit more refinement there, and some express reference, even if it's mirroring what might be the obligation that we've already set for the board and other documents, but some mirroring of that. We've had really good discussion about the length, the refinement of the local statements. Everybody was doing those local statements in the abstract. So now that you've seen them all on the page as to what others wrote or what I've put together, if there wasn't any, I think we've got some good guidance. And Katie, your comment there about trust and confidence of the public reading this as much as anything, I think was a really powerful point. And Mayor Smith, your points about, look, there are some very specific things, and Horowhenua has got some specific things in there as well that do need to be highlighted. I think it's going to give us some really good guidance. And then some refinement on the final point of the reporting, and giving some greater direction to the board as to what they're reporting on, but also that focus on the forward view, right, as opposed to this are the great things we've done in the first 6 months, but actually setting that platform about the things that are going to come for the second 6 months, if this were to be and beyond. Considering the link. So I think customer, relationship, affordability, links, refinement of the local statements, and the reporting provisions are those discrete areas that Mayor Smith is talking about, where I think we could just do a bit of fine-tuning. And I would encourage that if that resonates, that might form, and perhaps I'll get that out with a very short memo to help and provide some assistance, take it or leave it, as to those discussions that you'll be having with your groups over the next 2 weeks. Sam, I'm not inclined to pass anything more formal than that, but I think that might just give some guidance. What I implore everybody in the form of the feedback coming back, because it can now be more refined. I think because we've got largely general unanimity about the areas that need refinement, we don't need long soliloquies as to the justification for refinement. I need some words, right? We can take it that we actually agree that there's some refinement in these areas. Just give me blocks of the words. I don't want a page justifying the refinement of or the addition of an expectation that is only going to be a sentence long, because, to be honest, I don't want to then have to interpret your page to then come up with the sentence. Give me the sentence. And I think what we've got here is actually a meeting of the minds in terms of the areas that we need to focus on. So that would be very helpful. We are now getting to the wordsmithing of it because actually it seems that we're on an agreement as to the nature of the partnerships. Are we all agree? Helpful, yeah. And that if you need to talk to each other, of course, beforehand, particularly about local statements, about how's your local statement looking, and trying to necessarily match it in tone and length and style and points covered, then I would encourage those conversations to be had. Thank you, everybody. So there's no motion in terms of that. That was a good discussion. I appreciate it. The next paper, which is item 7, the reporting protocols of the committee. We've got the amazing, and thank you so much for all the work you do behind the scenes, Hannah White, sitting to my right, who's going to lead us through this paper and the 1, 2, 3, 4 points that I will take as a job lot that will pass or not and discuss as a motion at the end of this. Hannah, you can stay right where you are, but you might be able to lead us through this paper.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, you've done the big piece of business for today. These are much more administrative matters that you now have before you. We just wanted to formalise as a committee the relationship between the committee and, in particular, the shareholder councils, to make sure that, as representatives of your councils, that you understand where your role as representatives is back when it comes to anything where the committee hasn't had delegation, for example, how those recommendations will come up through your committee, how minutes of this committee would be reported through to the councils. So this is just formalising to make clear that the expectation is that whatever the normal process is of each of the shareholding councils, that same process would occur for this joint committee as would for any other committee of your councils. I appreciate for Ngā Tapu Waiaho this is a little bit odd, but it is probably necessary to reflect our council processes. Happy to take any questions.
Can I point out that number 4 of this paper says that any joint shareholders committee's recommendation to be put to each of the councils by the joint shareholders committee representatives for that council. It's not that I'm not available. I'm very happy to attend any meeting you'd like me to attend, and that goes for Ngā Tapu Waiaho as well, because effectively that will resonate with Ngā Tapu Waiaho. What it's really saying is it's not incumbent on the chair, as me, to come along and to present to the councils or to Ngā Tapu Wai for anything that is any joint shareholders committee recommendations, that you as the representatives are well able to do with that. If you need me there, wonderful. I'd love to be there, but it doesn't actually formally require me to be there. Mary Andy?
Yeah, just to check, my presumption is that this has been run past the chief executives and that's an agreed process in terms of administration. On that basis, I'm fully support.
The other point that I didn't raise is probably recommendation 1 there, which is that the chair of the committee come and report to your councils on a 6-monthly on progress.
And the Tapu Waiaho.
Yeah, and also to Ngā Tapu Waiaho, yes. Absolutely.
Twice a year. So I'm sorry, you will see my ugly mug at each of the partners' home bases. I really look forward to that, and that would probably be actually a joint presentation between myself and you as the representatives, because it would be great to be able to present what we are building here, and that's a united team. Mary Bernie?
Well, just on that, because I just wondered why the minutes, are they saying, Hannah, they're publicly available on the Palmerston North Council website? I assume they'd be available on everybody's website.
Yes, they've been published from us, and then each of your councils are linking on your web pages to that site.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Any questions? Actually, I will move as a job lot motions 1 to 4. Do I have a... There we go. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Dave Wilson. So seconded, moved and seconded. Any discussion, colleagues? Shot, Sam?
Can I just check with through you, Mr. Chair, our Chief Executive, that the language is captured correctly here. Because is it, our things are yeah. Can I just get you to check that wording is accurate?
You're saying Horowhenua is special, and
no,
you use your own language.
Yeah, in that middle column, is that accurate? Yeah. Okay. It's all right.
The minutes presented to Council are noting through proceedings of committee processes, but committees agree own minutes. Any other discussion? All those in favour, show of hands. Thank you. Unanimous. All those against, Hayden, I can't see you, but that's okay. You're not saying against, so I'll take that as a 4. That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Hayden. Item 8, confirmation of the meeting schedule. Hannah, could you lead us through that as well?
I can. To note that Mayor Palmerston has informed me this morning that we do not in fact need to change the time that I had circulated in this paper for the next meeting. I had suggested perhaps shifting the 10 a.m. to a 3 p.m. slot, but we can now, I understand, although it looks like Mr. Lee would like to speak, continue to hold that Friday 26th June meeting at 10 a.m. And to note the locations across both pages 21 and 22 of your agendas for this year, and for us to consider even wider locations in the new calendar year.
Yeah, I'll just check in my diary. We changed that because of you, did we, Mayor Smith? We don't have to now, so we'll keep it at 10 o'clock.
Chair, sorry, no, it wasn't me, but it was our council, and I apologise. We were having, we got really crossed messages from our elected members, and as a lot around the room will know, there is a bit of a recess in local government in July, and we were trying to cram a little bit of stuff in at the wrong time of the before people did disappear for a week or two, and that's no longer happening. So it crossed over the top of the previously organised Waters shareholding committee meeting, and I apologise that we were trying to accommodate both. And I just on behalf of our elected members, it was we mucked this committee round, so we can go back to the original time, which was 10 a.m.
It's all good.
Thank you.
All good. You know, these things happen. These are complex times, and we're trying to fit in with very significant diaries for not only individuals but organisations. So we appreciate it. That's no problem.
So to that end, Mr. Chair, I've changed the recommendation to...
Amazing. So the recommendation is now 10 a.m, not 10 p.m. They were written here, 10 a.m. For Friday the 26th, 10 a.m. Friday the 7th of August, 4th of September through to December at Tāne Nui Arangi, which will be, I'm really looking forward to in particular, but that's Horowhenua and Rangatane for the June, August and September through to the end of the year. I move that these be accepted as the confirmation of the meeting schedule for 2026 for the Shareholders Committee. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Marge. Any discussion? All those in favour? Carried. Thanks, colleagues. The new item, the transition update. Chris, are you able to join us perhaps right at the head, if that's okay? Pushing your microphone on as you sit there, and you can lead us through the transition update from the chief executives that we accepted onto the agenda. Good to see you. Kia ora koutou, nice to be here again.
So just thought I might start with a little bit of context around this before we sort of get into it. But so look, this is an update that we did the first one last month, but we've been putting an update together for the Central District Water Board. Just to give them, sort of in lieu of having like a chief executive's report, we figured that an establishment report at this
time sort of works pretty well. It's actually most of the material in this report is information that sort of comes up through the project steering group, the PSG, with the three chief executives and Danielle. So basically what we're doing on a monthly basis is consolidating that and providing it to the board so they can get good overall visibility. Obviously, in addition to this, there's a lot of specific things going to the board around specific topics and issues and what have you, but it's just a consolidated view. So effectively at the moment we have the PSG is probably our key sort of governance body that is overseeing the establishment program on a sort of a week by week basis. We're meeting most weeks, and we will do a sort of an update on all aspects of the program most weeks, and then we'll also do a bit of a deep dive into different elements that are relevant. The POG is still formally in operations, that project oversight group, which is the three mayors and Danielle again. So that's sort of our for the establishment program. That's sort of the key. That's the key sort of governance at the moment. The way that the POG is operating now is that we're meeting basically monthly after the board meeting. So the board chair, Steve Mahari, is going to come to that forum and provide an update on basically what's happening at the board meeting so that they can get good understanding of that, and any issues relating to sort of the overall establishment can be sort of dealt with through those forums. Having said that, we thought it was the key mandate for this committee is in relation to overseeing the company itself. You've obviously got a significant interest in the success of the establishment program. So we thought, it's not yet another thing we have to do, but providing the same update so it gives a really good transparency and visibility across what's happening in the establishment team to, not only, so the board's getting the same one, the chief executive is getting the same one, the PSG, and now this committee is getting it. So, and that's hopefully trying to keep everyone on the same page. And I think at the moment we're sort of just recognising that there's a sort of joint accountability really. So obviously the board has that sort of key accountability around the formation of the company and the things that happen there. But clearly, and particularly the chief executives are sort of, there's so many issues that are across all four entities that we have to keep track of. So the way that we're doing it at the moment is just really, trying to be as transparent as possible. Lots of engagement about any of the issues and what have you. So effectively, that's the point of this pack. In terms of talking to the establishment program itself, I won't go through all the slides. I'm happy to take questions, but I guess what I would say is that I think we're in a fairly good space at the moment. We are tracking ahead of schedule. Right at the very bit, more than a year ago when we started putting together, the idea around this and which ended up in the Water Services Delivery Plan. We had an initial implementation plan, which and it certainly wasn't quite wet finger in the air, but it was, anticipating, things. And I think there's a whole lot of assumptions we probably got wrong. And I guess as we've come along, we've probably realised that some of the timeframes that we had in that initial plan weren't going to get us to the line in time, with confidence and managing the risks. So we, and many of you have been involved in those decisions that, some months ago we made a decision to really put the hammer down and try and get things going. So we obviously had the board operating about, I think it's something like 8 months before the original plan had it. We've had the incorporation well ahead of schedule, and I guess what I'm saying is that I'm feeling comfortable that we're on track, but we have no sort of time to lose. And in fact, probably what we're trying to do now is really push forward some more decisions, because a lot of the decisions that we made now, if we can make them early, it just gives us so many more options and things that other water entities haven't been able to even consider. Because we're ahead of schedule, we can consider. Give you an example. So we're doing a lot of work at the moment looking at billing. So billing is obviously a critical function that we need to make sure we can do on day one. all of the water service entities that are going live on 1 July 2026 have really had no options, and they've had to cobble together billing arrangements through the existing councils. Potentially with the backstop of having to continue to rate, in the first little while, which is far from perfect. I think if we can make decisions in time, we can say, well, look, actually, we do have time to, say, build a billing engine and have a separate billing capability for the company and be able to produce bills. Probably the biggest challenge in all of that is just basically the relationship with your end customers and making sure they're all lined up so that they can pay the bill. That's an option that we have only because we've been able to push the program along. So look, I won't talk anymore. I'll just you've got the pack. Hopefully, it's fairly straightforward, and I'm happy to talk to any elements of it.
Thanks, Chris. Colleagues, any questions? You can take the report as having been received, and we're very grateful for it. Katie.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. I did have a question about the billing because it says in the pack there, partner councils assessing feasibility of option for billing on behalf of CDW, and that was due at the end of the May. So is that pretty much an update of that we might not have to do that?
Yeah, so just a little bit more. So at the moment, I guess there's lots of different elements to the billing. It's probably one of the most risky and complex things. But so there's, I think, basically buying and putting in place a billing engine and producing a bill is probably the easy part of it. The more complex part is the fact is you've got 54,000 customers that you have to then have a relationship with, that you can then send a bill and then having them in a position to be able to pay it. So I guess we're trying to keep options open at the moment, and one being basically having the three councils still bill on behalf of the entity. So the Act gives you a little bit of leeway, so it allows you, if you really are in trouble, to just continue to rate. But that's a pretty poor option, and certainly not one we're really seriously considering. But one you would consider is having each council bill on your behalf. It might still be in a separate bill, but effectively you think about it's in the same envelope. That is not simple, and there still would be a lot of work and a lot of cost involved in doing that. So that's just, I suppose we're looking at all of those options at this stage.
Yeah, is that something that's forming part of the transition agreement in terms of transferring a database of customers, essentially?
Yeah. So that the big advantages, so the biggest challenge that has been talked about, over the last 12 months is the fact that because of the Privacy Act, you can only use information specifically for the purpose it was being gathered. So the fact that you have people's information, emails and what have you, you would automatically, you can't just give that to the new company to say, oh, you'll need these. Luckily, in the Act, there was enough foresight to give an obligation to councils to pass that information of the ratepayers over to the company. So we've got tick. That's very good. We're able to do that. We're able to get all those, but then you're still going to develop that relationship. And if someone has got a direct debit arrangement in place, having to effectively potentially set up those all again and all of those things. So,
thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other questions, colleagues? Oh, Bernie, sorry. It doesn't. It just comes up with a number.
Yeah, we normally have our names on it. We need to organise that for next time. Thanks, Chris. Chris, just a couple of queries. Great to hear that we're 3 months ahead. Obviously signals that huge amount of work's been done. And I just wonder, I suppose, looking at those financials and seeing how much money we're having to, projected that we're going to need extra. And I just there's no correlation between being early and those extra spendings, because no doubt the establishment costs of these entities is going to be pretty closely looked at by a number of different people. And I just, want to, I suppose, is there a correlation between, being on ahead of the game and the extra costs that we might be having?
excellent question, and the answer is absolutely yes. That's part of it. Look, this is something we're still doing a lot of work on, and because we know that we need to be really transparent on this. We had what we've got in this report is basically reporting against the budget that was agreed as part of the collaboration agreement, which came out of the Water Services Delivery Plan. And it's quite a sort of a narrow piece. This doesn't include, for instance, the costs that the councils themselves, in terms of staff costs that are spending. In terms of early, yes, absolutely. If you take an example of the board is in place, so we sort of have to pay them. So obviously there's that's extra months of board costs. For instance, we have just in terms of the establishment team itself. We made a decision, late last year that we needed to set up the establishment team because we weren't going to have enough time if we didn't. So the initial assumptions were that the establishment team, wouldn't be really set up until, for a few months yet. So obviously the costs associated with those are early. I mean, one of the things, I guess, and this is one of the views that we're looking at, so that we can get really good understanding of all of these costs. So, for instance, my cost, so I'm sitting here currently, that is a cost against the establishment program. But if I wasn't sitting here, I'd be sitting in council and I'd still be being paid. So we're trying to really get a good understanding of what's the actual marginal cost of this, because even if you look at all of the council costs that are sitting there, that sort of add up to quite a big number actually, doesn't necessarily mean we're having to pay them more or anything different. So, but what we are doing from an accounting sense is making sure that any effort that is going into the establishment of the organisation is being captured, so that, because that is a legitimate establishment cost, but it doesn't mean necessarily there's something extra. There will be, for instance, in some cases we're backfilling people, so to create capacity to do this work, there are some, sometimes those are real costs, but actually when you add them up, they're a lot less in terms of what's going out the door than what we're, from an accounting perspective, we're capturing. Another big cost that we're just looking at the moment was, you may recall some of the debate we had very early on about the potential costs of IT. So the IT costs weren't in the original budgets at all, and they were sitting in years 2 and 3 of the program. Knowing that at some stage. So I guess those assumptions are all being tested through the work that we've done in terms of, well, how long can we leave it? Can we push it out into that? So one of the things we're now considering is having to bring that forward into this next financial year, so that we can have those systems in place. So, for instance, to do billing, we'd have to bring some of that money forward effectively. So, but it's in the budget, but out. So there's a few things like that we're still working through.
Thank you. Could I have another one? Thank you. And the other question related to the governance iteration that you're developing in terms of ensuring swim lanes are there. Just wondered how, the process or how you were developing it, and is this, I assume this committee's involved in it?
Yes, no, it is, and it's definitely part of that. And I guess, to be fair, it was sort of one of those things. It's that this stuff is coming. There's shareholder committees involved, and there's going to be a board and all of that, and then all of a sudden it's upon you, and you realise that everyone's like, oh, well, hold on, where do we fit in now? So there was, and I'm working pretty closely with the chief executive on all this, and part of it is just getting their heads square around, okay, so now that we've got this, how does everything work? How does everyone fit in? And I think, I guess while we've done a bit of work, we've done some sort of rescues and worked out, well, who's got the accountability on this particular decision, and who's responsible for delivering it, and who's all that sort of stuff. But really, I guess once we worked it through, it really came down to there's some formal stuff, but mostly it is about making sure that we're engaging appropriately and recognising that even where people may not have a formal accountability in the thing, they still have a very strong interest, around let's say the success of the establishment program. So, but one of the things that we're still just working through is a bit of an example there, is that
today, all three councils in their BAU capacity are having to make decisions about the operation of the water services. They have to enter into contracts, they have to enter into consents, they're making decisions about, people decisions and what have you. So we're just working on a way of making sure that where those significant decisions are being made today, that will actually be the company to deliver on that. There is just an engagement. So I think the bottom line, it's actually strong engagement is the way that we're doing this, and I think it's working. We probably went through a few rocky moments just trying to work it out, but it's just keep engaging and making sure we understand and respect people's interests, and also, I guess, a principle of no surprises. So, so we're working that out. But like bringing this report here is one of those ways that we'll do that.
Cheers. Thank you, Mayor Bernie. Can I go Sam and then come to you, Grant? And Andy, before Andy, let's go with you.
Thank you very much. My mind was in a similar space here in terms of it would be really, really useful if there was a one-pager to the three counts. Sorry? Yeah, we're on the same lines, aren't we?
If there's
a one-pager to the councils that details this was the forecast set-up costs, this is where we're currently at, this is what is projected, and the breakdown as to how that is funded, so that we're absolutely on the same page. The other question from me in terms of finance was, when is the expected timing of a drawdown from LGFA to the entity in its own right? And I know that it's different to normal banking, where you've got to have an income line and credit lines and all those sorts of things. Yeah. But LGFA have indicated that there is the possibility of a drawdown, as I understand it. When can you see that playing out?
Yeah. So that facility currently we're looking at, that would be available from about 1st of July. So we think 1st of July is our current assumption about when that facility would be available. I guess what we would do, it wouldn't be like the way that we borrow money from the LGFA generally. So that is like borrowing $20 million, for 7 years and what have you. What it would be was it'd be a facility that the organisation could draw down on as it needed to, almost like a revolving credit account. So basically, you wouldn't be borrowing any more than as and when you need it. So that's the sort of the concept of it. So effectively, and we've talked about this a few times, but the idea would be to be able to have our overall funding from LGFA as per the transition, we need they require guarantees, so those things are being put in place. The other thing, there's a paper coming, I think, to this council next Wednesday, and it'll ring a ticky, I think, a couple of weeks later, that will go through this. The other thing that the company needs to be able to have this line of credit in place is a letter of support. So LGFA require a letter, that the councils have given the company a letter of support, and that basically is because the funding would come ahead of revenue and assets. They're getting they're signed up. Once those are in place, the company itself can then work directly with LGFA to join, and we think that the LGFA are on track for approving that about I think it's April 10th of June. So that Jacinta's keeping very close contact with LGFA in terms of the process for that to happen. So that'll be the box that'll be ticked for that, and then at that stage, then the company can enter into a relationship directly with LGFA for having that facility to support it. What does that mean? So that actually means that currently all of the costs that are coming through, a lot of them are funneled doesn't sound quite right, but they come through Horowhenua. So Horowhenua District Council pays those bills, and then it's then split out amongst the others. That way, all of those bills from then on don't have to come through the councils. They can go straight to Central Districts Water, which means you don't have that sort of have to carry that cost as a council in the meantime until you transfer it over. And that's the key advantage. Does that make sense? I'm trying.
Yeah, it does, but our councillors will be asking, our communities will be asking,
Sure.
and we need to have a very clear message from all three councils around how this plays out.
I think what I'd say is I think this is a very efficient way of doing the funding, so it means that rather than having to tie up, the shareholder council's balance sheets with, supporting this establishment cost, it can go straight onto the company.
Yeah.
Sam. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up to Mayor Bernie's line of questioning on there was a comment on page 10 of the pack, which talks about adding the board and the shareholders committee to the governance framework is requiring a rethink of roles and responsibilities. And to Andy's point about the one pager, I think it would be useful if there was some sort of visualization of how the governance frameworks all sit together, because there's a few questions that are coming out of this pack which are probably me getting into some operational swim lanes. But I was keen to just sort of see the picture of how these moving parts work together with POG and PSG, and so that we're really clear about where we get visibility of things, or how things will come through the machine or through the different swim lanes, and that we're getting visibility, or that we have assurance that the things are being thought of or dealt with. So that was just my request in terms of that one pager, in terms of, and I think we had one earlier on sometime, but maybe just an update of kind of where that sits in those roles and responsibilities in those swim lanes. That would be useful.
That's good. So we've sort of had a couple of things just sort of at a very, very high level. I'm on action to update the document that sort of sets some of this out, and I think there's a couple of slides in there that might be a good sort of one pager to sort of just set it out.
Yep. And so as some examples, and again, this is me, getting into potentially some spaces I shouldn't, but I'm gonna do it. Is I read in here in the pack about the communication strategy. We're working on that, and I've obviously been watching what's happening around the country with other water entities standing up, and how money is being invested into advertising and other things. And so I want to have some confidence that we're being really clear about why we're doing some of these things. Want to have assurance around, for example, that we're working on a people plan, that we've got a really clear process for communicating clarity to our people, and that we're appropriately managing relationships between each of the organisational CEOs and how they manage that process internally. Even in here there was a reference around the GIS work stream, and so I know that's getting down to the weeds, but it's around, if we're setting up an organisation around efficiency, saving money, I want to just be absolutely assured that the decisions we're making are kind of consistent with that theme, or that principle, that we're not, again, duplicating systems, and that we're not introducing further inefficiency. So that's a long-winded way of saying, just want to see what those governance arrangements are, so that I can be assured about some of those operational things, and that people are turning their minds to those things, and that then we get to see some visibility about how those things are being, tackled or addressed.
Sure. Yeah, no, we can certainly do that. And, I think it's, what that picture shows, of course, is that at one end you've got the board. So, and there's, you went through a lot of effort to hire a very capable board, on the basis that they are very commercially minded and understand that, you've then got this committee, which its job is to develop a statement of expectation and be really, really clear with the company about its priorities and expectations for it, and you're doing that job now. And we've got the other governance which was already in place around the PSG and the PAG. So I guess what I would say, the bottom line, I think that there's a lot of governance in relation to this program. And it's something that the team feels every day, and I'll be quite honest, we feel overgoverned. It feels like we just constantly are preparing, either responding to or preparing for governance meetings. So there's certainly plenty of that. But I 100% also get the fact that there are a lot of really important stakeholders and partners in this place that feel very, who have a lot of stake in terms of the success of this. So I understand why those things are in place. So I guess, and I think you've asked exactly the right thing there, Sam, is that, we can sort of set that out so that you can see what the governance arrangements in, and hopefully you'll agree with me that there's lots of scrutiny on every decision. And there will be things that you'll look at. You'll look at the plans for digital systems and what have you, and you'll basically say, why couldn't we have done that for 27 cents? And we are going through a lot. There's a lot of work going into trying to understand what the right balance is in terms of absolutely minimising the cost of the establishment, but also setting the company up for absolute success going forward as well.
Thank you. Sam, Mayor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. Look, Chris, rather than sort of labouring the point, and don't want to get into swim lanes we shouldn't, and you have answered it pretty well. Is there a written report? I'm sorry, it's really hard to hear at times, so I'm not sure if you said there was a one-page or a written report.
A one-pager on what, sorry, Grant?
What you're talking about now, you've talked about money coming forward and a bit of an update and everything else.
Yes, there will be. So I'll take the action to. It's a sort of an element of the work that we've done around the swim lanes and clarifying all the roles and responsibilities. So I'll take the action to produce maybe more than one page, but just something that very simply helps clarify all of the how all the governance works. Yeah.
And you spoke about bringing money forward. So the CDW board pick that off, do they?
Well, ultimately, yes, that's right. But I guess so that is ultimately it's a decision, for the board. But I guess, and what I've just been saying is that we recognise that, while, there's always, people have the decision rights, doesn't mean you want to sort of go away and do stuff, and without having the light being shone on it. So I guess the key thing will be is making sure that all the key stakeholders and partners understand, the rationale for it, what other options are being considered, and if it is bringing forward some investment, why, what would those other options and what the cost of those other options would be. So I guess the team is going to work hard, particularly working with the chief executives and making sure that we have a collective view around, what the proposals are and why, and the justification for it.
And just on the, we've seen what the government are doing with efficiencies and AI and everything else. Is that sort of being thought about I presume you've got consultants looking at this, because, it is quite a bit of work. Are they looking at that and what other water entities? So a bit to Sam's point, Councillor Sam's point around efficiencies, we're not just going to create a something that's bespoke to CDW, and there is thinking around that.
I love the way you're thinking, Grant. So actually, that's a big part of the strategy that's been developed, is to so looking at what are the other entities doing. So the good thing that we've got is, even though we might be sort of on the fastest track of any of the water entities that are going live 1 July 2026, there's 4 others that are already going live before then. So what we're looking at is, big part of the strategy is to say, look, if you want to be aligned with what other people are doing, and there's a couple of very good reasons for that, and actually not do anything bespoke. So you basically take a copy of effectively what others are doing, and then you implement that. It makes it a very cheap implementation relative to anything bespoke. But one of the things that also allows you to do is we're all thinking about being efficient and knowing that we've got an economic regulator that's going to be scrutinising every decision we make. So if we align around systems and processes, that means we can start looking at effectively shared services going forward.
But a lot of that really relies on making sure that we're not all doing things a little bit different. So there are some emerging trends across the sector about, who's the, which system is the one to choose. So we're looking at, so that's a big part of it. The other thing that we're looking at is, given that, how do we then go and procure a system? So we're unlikely to want to go and do an open RFP and just ask everyone to respond. Not only is that costly and time consuming and what have you, but it's sort of slightly disingenuous to the people. So we're thinking about very bespoke procurement, and if we say it really only comes down to these two systems, you talk to those two. If it comes down to one system, is how do you do, instead of running a procurement process, you run a process to satisfy yourself that you're getting good value for money, or the best price. One of the advantages we've got is that some of our colleagues have gone early, have negotiated deals with technology suppliers specifically on the basis that others can leverage off that deal. So we're in a really good space, being sort of a fast follower, I guess. So all of those things are being considered as part of the strategy that's been presented to the board.
Thank you.
And obviously, after the board sort of seen things, we would get a look at it at some stage.
Yeah. So we've already had a good briefing just this week, actually, with the chief executives to take them through the digital strategy, so that they can see the things that have been considered. I mean, where we started was looking at all of the options, saying, well, could you actually stay on a council system? Because obviously that would takes a lot of risk out, but would potentially the cheapest. There's the option of taking a council system and just replicating it and doing a copy of it, and then the third one is actually implementing a new bespoke system. And so we've gone through that to try and understand, what you need to do to be able to get systems that are going to be fit for purpose and actually set you up well for the future, considering the sort of total cost of ownership perspective as well. Because if we, one of the challenges, and we talked about this with billing, is if we have to get councils to do billing for us, each three council will have to spend a lot of money and a lot of time and effort getting that billing set up to do effectively what might be a one-off bill for the company. Whereas what we could do, if we've got enough time to put a billing system in and have it working ourselves, that means we avoid all that extra cost that you would effectively duplicate. But again, come back to the only way you can do that is by making decisions early, going fast, giving yourselves the time to be able to do that. So anyway, we've taken the chief executive through that this week, and certainly we'll make sure that there's good visibility of what the plan is and the rationale for it. We need everyone to be able to say, yes, I understand about the plan, and we understand the rationale, and especially if you're bringing money forward, in terms of spending it now rather than down the track, we need to make sure that everyone's on board for that, and and says yes, and it's it's the best value option that we have.
Sam?
It was just I didn't articulate my question very well before, so it's I'm going to turn the question to you, Mr. Chair, if that's all right. There's acknowledging Chris's comment that there's the perspective that CDW could be over-governed. I kind of just want to get clarity on what role the Shareholders Committee plays in respect to monitoring, inputting into that establishment and transition work, or at least having visibility of it, and so how you think that will work. Because I have absolute confidence that behind the scenes chief executives are absolutely leading this and are having the right conversations, but I'm not clear on what role and what it looks like in terms of this shareholding committee, and so I don't know if you've done any thinking on that, or whether you have any expectations in terms of the information flow coming through whatever groups to here. But have you had that conversation?
Yeah, we have, and a lot of thinking. I think it's really clear what the Shareholders Committee's role is leading to the passing of the SOE, and that is
that is, things such as the MOE with Ngā Tapu Aho, these other provisional documents, the instruction of the establishment team of getting the board up to speed are not all things that we are involved in. I keep abreast of the broad developments of what's happening in a sense on your behalf, and occasionally say, look, this is something that probably could be angled and directed over here. Our sole main focus and purpose at the moment is getting that SOE over the line. Why is that? Because in that first year of the real crunch time of a huge amount of this work, having a very set deadline of the 1st of July 2027, our mechanism and how we play into that establishment is the clear instructions to the board and their clear reporting to us. And so we're here to ensure that the board is given accurate instruction, so we don't need to get down into the level of the executive director and in the near future, a chief executive in the establishment of those bodies. Incredibly grateful for these reports, and of course we are interested parties. Many of these discussions are happening in parallel with discussions directly with what was at least used to be referred to as the PSG, the project steering group, with the chief executive, so they'll keep informed. With the POG, the project oversight group, which are the mayors, and they're kept informed, and there's the direct chain through into the councils. But here it's SOE and the structure of that reporting that we've just spoken about, being clear on that the board then reports back to us. So there's no chance of us getting down too far into the weeds and skipping levels and giving a headache and an unnecessary one, although our questions of course would be legitimate, but an unnecessary sort of hindrance and that's sticking to our swim lane, which is the SOE and then the reporting. And that. So the answer to your question, it's through the channel of the reporting is established in the SOE from the board to here. Chris, have you got anything to add on that?
I think that was very close to what I would have said, Mr. Chair. But to the point of being here today to deliver this, it's making, I think the important principle is no surprises, and making sure the key stakeholders understand what's going on and can have the ability to ask a question of why did you make that decision? Because, happy to be here and
so there's line of sight. I really have nothing to do essentially with the establishment team now directly. It's not a case of Chris and I or his team and I meet. We don't. I have a regular informal meeting with the chair of the board because that's the avenue by which it's more appropriate of the mechanics of things. And I have a regular engagement with what used to be called the PSGs, but the chief executives as well. And that I feel very comfortable in serving you in this committee with the information that I'm getting of in the line of sight that I have without being involved but being kept in the loop through those particular streams. But I stay out of Chris and the teams here as much as possible. Thanks. Colleagues, any other questions as we bring this to a close? Chris, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. There's very, very few circumstances I think anybody in this room would have ever had somebody present and say, we've sped up the timeline and we've ahead of the timeline, as opposed to, I'm sorry, we need more time. So we do very much appreciate it, and we know that will be a regular feature at our meetings. The last item on the agenda is the work schedule. I will take that as received. Are there any questions about the work schedule? Yes. Yes. It depends what the comment is, Wade. But come here. Here's the microphone.
Sorry, just a point following on from that last commentary about the point of this committee. I think it might be worthwhile if the CEs just go away and just provide a bit more advice back to the committee as well about your role. And there's kind of a couple of things coming through, and one of the things that you don't want to have happen is, and I just sort of likened it to some information, some reports are going to come up to your councils over the next week or so about LGFA and advancing loans and those sorts of things. I think that there is a role for this committee to kind of have a visibility of those things before they reach the elected members' table, so you can then support the decisions that the councils are then going to make. So I think the information flow and also getting an update about things that are happening while this project progresses are critically important. And it's not to it isn't to dive into the detail, but if you've got questions about the detail, my view is that that's totally appropriate because it just gives you more comfort about things that are actually going on, and you get to ask questions. So I think maybe, Chair, that we'll just kind of take away from here some of the thinking and getting the feel from the conversations that happened around here, and then maybe look to bring something back to you as well.
Absolutely, that would be helpful. Look, I didn't want to give the impression that's our only object. Here in the work schedule for the 7th of August and the 4th of September, we've got visibility of Council's draft transfer agreements. 4th of September, visibility of Council's draft transfer agreements again, an opportunity to comment on the board's draft significance and engagement policy. So the intention is that even if it's not our point to make a decision on, we are kept in the loop. So that would be that would be really helpful. But I don't want anything I've said to be interpreted that's not already on our schedule for us to be regularly kept in the loop. It's not a case that it's the SOE and nothing, and everything else comes through me. That's certainly not the case. And there is actually hardwired into our agendas and our work schedule that we'll be given regular updates, the nature of which we've just had a good 40 minutes on from the report from the Executive Director. Andy.
Yeah, that was the basis of my comments earlier around the one-pagers in terms of a common theme going out. So there's absolutely commonality on our messaging.
And that was a good example because that was a report here to keep us up to date. But actually, the take-home bit of homework for Chris and the team to do is to actually provide that one-pager directly to the councils, not necessarily through here, but directly to the council. So it's a great opportunity, I think, for us to be kept up to speed, but also to be able to put some points in there as if clarification or any small extra reporting steps are required directly to the councils. This is a convenient conduit by which those discussions can be had. Any other discussion on that? Thanks again, Chris. I appreciate it, and thanks for that opportunity to be able to get some of that more visibility, Wade, and some advice that's iterative and ongoing about how we might do our jobs well. And also interested to hear from members of the committee at any time if anybody ever feels, and I know this is the sort of the mantra of the established committee, and that is that we have conversations often with as many people as we can, so nobody feels as if they're being left behind. And so, if there's any person, anybody on this committee that feels as if, oh look, I'm a little in the dark at this, I'd really like to know what's happening here, then I'd really welcome that, because then we can have a discussion about getting the appropriate advice and seeing if we can get something on the agenda to keep us all on the same page. Thank you. So I'll take as accepted that that work schedule as received. The work schedule. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Marge, Katie, Andy, Hannah. We really appreciate your service. Sam, Mayor Bernie, Dave, Hayden, who I think has left us, Danielle, Mayor Smith, Diana, thanks so much for your observation today, and we really look forward to hopefully having you in the room at our meeting. I think it is in Horowhenua again in June, and we really appreciate the alternates. It's a bit of a task actually coming in as an alternate with a fast-moving pace, and we appreciate your attendance. Thank you also to Ashley and to Monique, your team, and the manaakitanga that you've shown us in being able to meet here today. We really appreciate it. Sam and Bernie echo that. Thank you very much for allowing me to sit in your seat, Bernie. I appreciate it. We have, in the absence of Hayden, who led us in the opening karakia, we actually have a closing karakia in front of us. It's laminated. On one side is the opening, on one side is the ending. I wonder if Mayor Bernie would like to lead us, and we'll have the words here. We can perhaps take it a little slow, and apologies if we don't quite get some of the pronunciation right, but it's important, and I think if we all do it together, it would be great. Mayor Bernie. Thank you, everybody. Go well. Have a good weekend. I hope that the rest of the day is a profitable one for you.